So as you may know, if you've been watching this YouTube channel, is that I read a lot, like a lot. Some of it's part of my job. I do teaching different nonprofit workers and things like that, but I just enjoy it. And there's so much to learn from this. And I've explained a lot of that in other videos. But today I want to hit a few things that I picked up from a book I read recently. This all just kind of blew my mind. So I recently finished this massive tome right here on Elon Musk by Walter Isaacson. And he's probably one of the greatest biographers alive as of this recording, but a really fascinating read. Elon Musk is a very controversial figure, one of the richest men in the world. He started a whole bunch of companies like SpaceX and Tesla and all this stuff. And, someone doesn't get to that position just haphazardly. I'm very intrigued by high performers, I guess you could say, or people who are outside of the norm. So what is it that makes this man unique, and are there things we can learn from his life? So this book is a bit of an answer to that. Again, just fascinating. It's very well written, and I really love Walter Isaacson's work. He has some fantastic biographies. But there is a piece in here about Elon Musk that I found really interesting, and it's his commandments for success based on what he's learned from running Tesla and SpaceX, some of the most valuable companies in the world. Especially Tesla is just an insanely valued company. Really has revolutionized a lot of industries and things like that. So what I'm going to do is pull some of the pieces from this book and look at what he says are his 5 commandments for success. I think there's a lot to learn here from this. I'm not a big businessman, and I'm sure people watching this aren't, but there are some pieces in here that could be valuable for life, or just out of pure interest sake, be like, how does the richest man or one of the richest men in the world think? How does he make his decisions? How does he go about running all of these different companies and, again, revolutionizing entire industries like, reusable rockets, which is insane because people used to think when you launch a rocket into space, you can't use it again. And he found out a way to do that, or electric vehicles with Tesla and so forth. So without further ado, here we'll dive into this. He actually calls this the algorithm, as he says in his meetings with his engineers and things. And when they're in these meetings, they're regularly bringing up these ideas, this algorithm, these ways of making decisions, which that right there I think is good, because as a concept, having frameworks that you use for how you make your decisions can be very helpful. Even things like checklists. I've started doing that with some of the work I do, and it's like, wow, that's really helpful. It keeps me on task and makes things a lot more efficient. So he calls this the algorithm. So the first one that he has is this. So this is quoting from the book. Again, recommend you get a copy. You can find it linked down in the description below. So this is page 284. And the first one is question every requirement. This is a big one that if you read on Elon Musk, he's doing this all the time. He's always questioning, is that how it works? How do we figure this out? How do we make this better? Question everything, every requirement. And then he goes on to say, he's talking about requirements. Each should come with the name of the person who made it. You should never accept a requirement that came from a department, but you need to know that the actual specific real person who made that decision. And then he's basically saying, find out who made that requirement, and then you should question it no matter how smart that person is. Then make the requirements less dumb, he says. So that's actually really helpful. I've worked in a nonprofit for a while, helped start it 8 years ago. And, sometimes you'll set a policy in place years ago, and then you'll just kind of keep doing it. And you never look at that policy closely again. And then maybe years later, you're like, wait, why do we do it this way? And you pull up that policy and you're like, that actually should be updated. Like, that doesn't actually make sense. But it's very, very easy to just continue on doing it because that's how we've always done it. And, you don't really think that through. So this is a good rule. Question every requirement. Okay, moving on. The second point, delete any part or process that you can. So he's saying this from a engineering or manufacturing perspective, but this could apply in anything really. You want to simplify your processes in your organization or with your team, or even how you do your work. He said you may have to add them back in later. So if you take out a part of a process, you may realize, oops, you actually do need it. You can always put it back. In fact, if you do not end up putting back at least 10% of them, you're not deleting enough, he says. So he'd be very aggressive about on a Tesla assembly line, for example, simplify the process as much as possible. And sometimes you'd mess up and you'd actually have to add that process back in, but that's okay because now you've been assured we actually do really need that. Again, I do this a lot in my own workflows and things as I'm figuring out I work a lot remotely and digitally, but it's easy to make things really complicated and actually sit down and be like, do I need all these parts of the process? Can I simplify this and take less steps and still do the same thing? So yes, very important. So point number 3, simplify and optimize. Really goes with the previous point. He said this should come after step 2. A common mistake is to simplify and optimize a part of a process that should not exist. So that's really key, because sometimes, you'll spend all this time trying to simplify something that just shouldn't even be there to begin with. Optimization is, I think, especially in today's world of, remote work and digital workspaces and things like that, it's easy for things to get overly complex. So this is one I use quite a lot myself. Number 4, accelerate cycle time. Again, he's thinking in manufacturing terms, those quick feedback loops, so to speak. Every process can be speeded up, but only do this after you have followed the first 3 steps. In the Tesla factory, again, he says, I mistakenly spent a lot of time accelerating processes I realized later should have been deleted. So once you've done all the first 3 steps, then figure out, okay, now how can we speed it up? And, you have to be careful with this. And this is something he's not exactly a role model in a lot of ways, because he'll push his employees maybe, too far or demand too much of people. But it's still a good thing to think about, is like, how can we get our feedback times faster? So like you accelerate the cycle of how something is done so you can get your feedback quicker and then implement improvements and changes and keep it moving more quickly. Otherwise, if it drags out too long, you can lose touch of the start and end times of the process because it's just so long. Again, this is something I've thought about quite a lot with some of our teams, and sometimes your review times can take so long to get around, they almost lose their relevancy. And so get what he's saying there. He's saying in terms of manufacturing, I'm thinking more in terms of workflows and team dynamics and so forth. And point number 5, automate. This comes last. The big mistakes in their Nevada Tesla factory, he's saying, was that I began to try to automate every step. We should have waited until all the requirements have been questioned, parts and process deleted, and the bugs have been shaken out. And again, this makes sense. I've seen this happen on some teams where you try to automate something and it's too early in the process because your infrastructure or your processes haven't been solidified enough and really tried and true. And so it's too early, and you end up wasting a lot of time trying to automate something that's maybe not even ready to be automated. So that's an interesting point. These are the 5 points that Elon Musk uses with his teams, with Tesla, SpaceX, and a whole bunch of other companies that he runs. Yeah, he's not necessarily a role model in some ways, but I think there's a lot we can learn from the very successful people that have done extraordinary things, and he has done that. So just to recap, it's question every requirement, delete any part or process that you can, simplify and optimize, accelerate the cycle time, and automate. And again, this is what he calls the algorithm, which is, it's interesting. It's interesting. As one of the many pieces I pulled out of this book, I think you'll find it an intriguing read. And if you enjoy this kind of thing, consider checking it out. It just came out last year and is the most thorough biography of Elon Musk to date. So anyway, he has a bunch of other things in the following pages as well. Things like it's okay to be wrong, that's really good. So it's okay to make mistakes and admit that you're wrong, and so forth. Yeah, some good stuff. And while at the same time also acknowledging that Elon Musk has an enormous amount of flat spots and a lot of areas that he's not exactly a role model. So take all these things with a grain of salt. Hopefully these principles are things you can say, oh, that's helpful. I could figure out a way to apply that to my own work, my own life. Maybe if you're part of a team or lead a team, you can find, hey, what are ways we can apply some of these things, because I think there's some lessons there for us all. So that is a quick overview of that one small section of this much larger book. And I've actually done a couple of podcasts on Elon Musk. If you go look up the podcast I have with my brother called The Mind Castle, you can search out anywhere you get your podcasts. You'll find we've done a little more detail on some of this if you're interested and want to dive into it more. So if you found this interesting, you should consider subscribing to my email newsletter where I write about the things I'm learning and what I've been reading and so forth. And of course, if you're interested in what I'm reading, you can go to my Goodreads account and follow me there. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.